I realized as I was getting older that there are things you forget, and I love when my relatives tell me stories about my parents when they were younger, or various things that I never knew about our family. And then I think I learned from my friend Shirley that there was going to be a class at the senior center on memoir writing, and she encouraged me to try it. So I said, yeah, I think that would be fun, and I went. And Kathy Kearns was our teacher, and she was very good, and that was the beginning.
One day, my husband read in the senior flyer that goes out monthly, they're having a memoir writing group at the senior center, why don't you join? And I said to him, well, I don't know how to write. And he said, well, you sure know how to talk. So I went down and I signed up. It just happened to be that particular day. And I was so impressed. I thought, though, that I had no memories of my past. And I thought, well, maybe I was tortured as a kid and just can't remember. But as everyone else told their stories, little pictures came into my mind about my childhood that was similar. And then, all of a sudden, I had a story, I had a memory, I had a memoir. And now, 10 years later, I have a lot. The older I get, though, the sharper my memory is not. And so a lot of embellishment goes into my stories, but it makes it a lot more fun than sometimes how things really turned out.
I was one of the first ones to join the group. I joined it because I enjoy writing, and I wanted to see some of my writing on paper. Being in an environment with other people, I could hear their stories, give me ideas for writing my own stories. I enjoyed it, yeah.
I moved from Westborough to Northborough about 2.5 years ago, and went to the senior center, which was immediately very captivating. There were very nice people who showed me around, and it took me a couple of months to get familiar with everything. And I heard about a book club as well as the memoir writing club, and I thought it'd be a good idea to join the memoir writing club, or not club, group, because I had written 2 or 3 books of my own memoirs, and I thought I would learn something. And I joined the group, which was very accommodating, and they allowed one man to come in the group because they were mostly ladies. But they have put up with me so far, so it has been wonderful.
I had met Ruth Anderson and Shirley at one of the consignment stores in town, and they mentioned writing the memoir writing group, and I was interested in writing my memoirs, and so with their encouragement I joined the group. Well, I didn't even know how to start writing my memoirs, so they helped me get started doing it. It's been very good, and it's really very peaceful and rewarding to be able to, at my age, to be able to look back on my life and write about things that are meaningful to me.
My friend Ruth and I do yard sales, and we do the yard sales and we purchase things for the senior center's fair, for the jewelry cart that we have, just different things in general. We're always talking about writing a book about yard selling. And one day I was at the memoir group. Ruth hadn't arrived yet, late, but I said to the group, Ruth and I are always talking about writing a memoir book. Oh, they jumped all over it before I realized that that wasn't what we had talked about in the first place. But I got Ruth into it, and she can't get out of it now anyway. But they loved the idea. Everybody wanted to be heard. As Kathy said, your stories deserve to be heard, and it's true. Now, they say these are our best stories, but I'm waiting for the sequel because I really have some great stories beyond what I've already written. Of course, that's my opinion.
A bunch of us in the group thought it might be fun to put together our stories. We had been talking about this for a while, maybe putting them together in mimeograph, copying them and putting them in a folder. And and we'd think about it, and then we'd stop and, you know, continue to write. And one of the men, there is a man in our group, there are two brave men in our group, and one of them had self-published a book about his life. So he had had the experience of self-publishing, and he kind of knew more than any of us how to go about doing that. So he kind of became the head person around that. And little by little, we got this thing put together. And my son-in-law, John Fercucci, is a professional artist. That's what he does for a living. And so I asked John if he would be willing to do an illustration for the stories. And he said yes, he would. So he has illustrated one story from each person, and there are 12 people, 12 contributors, so there are 12 illustrations, which is kind of fun too.
So one day, some people were talking about we should put our stories in a book, and the conversation went on, and eventually we decided we could do something because they figured out that I may be able to help in the editing and the publishing process. I remain the technical coordinator because people write in different formats, in different software, in different things, including handwriting. And all of that had to be collated so that they looked uniform, they had the same font, they had the same delivery on either side. And so I became that person. We may call it So Many Lives, So Many Stories. That is written on a brick that is engraved and put in the pathway of the senior center by the Memoir writing group some time ago. An illustrator that we had on our side decided to make it all bricks like this and put the brick with the writing on it on the back of the cover of the book. And I added my 2 cents worth by putting a photograph of the senior center on the back and writing some introduction to the book. There are these days a few companies that offer publish it yourself. So you give the company PDF files of your work and they would put it in a book form. I used createspace.com. It's a company that is now owned by Amazon.com. So this book with this title is available from both companies, and they'll print, if you ask for one, they'll print one and send it to you. Eventually we got to a book form that you can hold in your hand and read, which is entirely different than staring at a tube or looking at your writings on a piece of paper. So it's now available on Amazon.com, and pretty soon it should be available at the Senior Center.
When I was a little girl, and I was one of 8 children, number 4, which was not a good place to be, but at any rate, we had a dog. His name was Sandy, and my uncle brought him to us. He was a little brown pot Scotty and pot whatever got over the fence at midnight, right? So I've always loved this little dog, and I thought, now I was maybe 4 and now I'm 82, so you know how long I have loved this dog. And I sat down one day and I just wrote this poem for him, about him, and it's called My Friend Sandy McTavish. Sandy McTavish was a friend of mine. He was 3 when I was 9. His hair was short and kind of tan, the color of the ocean sand. His legs were short and very stubby. His face was so cute, it was a little chubby. His big brown eyes, they were so sad. He'd cast them down when he'd been bad. His siblings, they were all jet black. He was a misfit, a real throwback. One night he was put into an open sack and left upon the railroad track. A stranger happened by that night. He saved poor Sandy from his plight. That stranger brought him home to me, for Sandy McTavish was a dog, you see. We romped and played until he was 11, for then he was called to doggy heaven. If there are children with Sandy up above, I hope they play and romp and laugh and love. Sandy McTavish was a friend of mine. I have loved and missed him all this time.
There's one that I wrote about Aiden, who was my 8-year-old great-grandson, who was given an award at his school, the Woodstock Elementary School in Connecticut. And he was chosen from all of the children in the elementary school as to receive the Medal for Respect, and which we were all extremely proud of. And then he was also chosen as the student who had the innate characteristics that best represented the philosophy of the school. And that was in the 2nd grade. He you know, my final statement is that we all could learn from him. Aiden is a reflection of the encouragement, love, and support that he has received from his immediate and extended families. At the very young age of 7, almost 8, he has demonstrated an exceptional strength of character, along with the courage to do what is right in spite of the consequences. He is a bright young man with a delightful sense of humor, outstanding athletic abilities, and sincere compassion and concern for others. He has exhibited a level of maturity that far exceeds his chronological age. He deserves the recognition he has received from the faculty of Woodstock Elementary School. Although he is smaller in stature than the average 8-year-old, he stands tallest among his peers because of his respect and compassion for others, his courage in the face of adversity and conflict, and due to the simple reality that he is just one great kid.
This is a story about getting our little dog, Remy, who was a rescue. And I will read just a little bit about him. So the name of the story is Rescued. Some things are meant to be. My sister Susie and I were visiting our 90-something-year-old Aunt Rhea in her New York City apartment. On Saturday, we were off in a taxi to see a Broadway show when our driver told us that the possibility of the play being canceled due to a stagehand strike. When we phoned the theater, we learned that this indeed was the case. So we asked the driver to drop us off near a folk art museum we had noticed. Our new plan was to have lunch and then spend the afternoon exploring the museum. As we were walking toward the restaurant, Susie noticed an animal rescue van parked on the sidewalk. Being the owner of 8 dogs in her spacious Pennsylvania property of 52 acres and a self-admitted dogaholic, she insisted we check the van. I knew that I needed to agree so we could get on with our day. And so we boarded the van. To make a long story short, I will not read the whole story, but to make a long story short, I asked if they might have a Schnauzer, and they said, you know, we just got a little dog that is a Schnauzer mix. You go check everything out and I will bring the dog down. And they brought our little 9-pound, floppy-eared white dog down, and that was it. He was mine. It took me a while to realize that and to admit that, yes, I really did want him, and here I'm in New York, and how am I going to get him home? But it was a foregone conclusion for the moment I saw him and I held him.
This is a story, well, it really went. My wife was giving a speech at her sister-in-law's 50th birthday. And I wasn't going to be there, but she asked me to write it. So I wrote it, and this is, you have to understand a little bit about Indian culture. My brother-in-law was working in Africa. We had sponsored him to come to the United States. And he wanted to get married, so he goes to India, gets married according to the traditional styles, you know. Parents find a girl and he goes and says yes. And then he was going to come to this country. But his wife couldn't come for about 6 months or so. So he was very nervous all the time. Finally all the papers came through and one day she was going to arrive. Now the 3 of us, myself, my wife and my brother-in-law, decided how are we going to make sure that she comes out of JFK Airport, that we definitely get her. She's lightning fast, so So we told her to wear a red sari. And the three of us positioned ourselves at different points of the airport international arrivals building where she's likely to come out. Well, I won't bore you with the details of how my brother-in-law prepared to greet her, how many times he put cologne on, and how many times he shaved and so on, but you'll see it later. There was an important thing we have to consider. The JFK is a very busy place, and international passengers have 2 or 3 or more exits to come out at. Eventually, my husband and I had studied the wedding pictures on the airport and so on, so we strategically positioned ourselves in different places so that we can see her coming out. I was there when she exited. However, on second look, I was confused. The face looked like my sister-in-law from the photographs, but the sari was not red. She was wearing a distinctly yellow sari. So I was uncertain what to do when my wife came running over and started greeting our sister-in-law. And she said, "Hello, Bhabhi." Bhabhi is sister-in-law in Gujarati. As she's saying that, you are my Bhabhi, another woman runs over and says, "She's my Bhabhi. My brother married her and she's going to Dallas, Texas." Here they were, 2 women fighting over one poor young bride, claiming her for her brother. If she had chosen to go with the other lady directly to Dallas, an expectant husband was also waiting for her there. Finally, my brother-in-law arrived, huffing and puffing and making his way through the crowd and said, "Don't let him take her away, this is my Manorama," he said with a pleading look in her eyes. The other lady was outnumbered, and she started to search for her real Bhabhi. And that is an account of her first day in this country, on the soil of America. I'm glad for my brother and my family that she chose JFK and not Dallas.
I would advise everybody to write their stories and just to have it for anybody who comes after who would be interested.
I do think everybody can write and should write something because it's very satisfying.
These ladies have wonderful stories to tell, and it would be a shame for them to get lost.
A lot of people say, "But that wasn't my best story, I want some more." So I think it may be prudent to wait for the reception of the first book. And if we think they will get the New York Times Best-Selling Book Award, then I'm sure we'll go for book number 2.